And the Karen Read jury continues to have some lunch. Deliberations will pick up when they finish. As you know, they have told the judge we're deadlocked. Judge said, I'm sorry, as hard as you've worked, we'd like to get a little more out of you. So they're going to go back at it after the lunch ends in just a few minutes here. In the meantime, we're looking at some of the closing arguments. You know, this jury's been wrestling with something. Is it who did what, cause of the injuries, the battle between the defendant and the deceased? Nobody knows for sure. But we are certain that these closing arguments help make an impression with this jury. So let's go back in. More of Alan Jackson, the defense attorney for Karen Read. Here we go.
The door, staring at that SUV over and over and over again from 12:29 to 12:50. She was very specific about that time frame. But we know that the SUV was gone from 34 Fairview by about 12:30. Had to be in order to connect to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. So unequivocally, Jennifer McCabe was lying about watching that SUV, and it makes you wonder why. And to add to that deceit, she was also blatantly lying about the calls to John's phone. You remember that colloquy back and forth. She said that every single one of those calls to John's phone during that time was a butt dial. How are those lies connected? And why are they connected? Jennifer McCabe knows. Was she butt dialing John over and over? Or was someone looking for John's phone that went missing? Let's talk for a second about what actually happened in the time leading up to everyone going to 34 Fairview. Brian Albert, Brian Higgins show up drunk at the waterfall. They had been drinking in the afternoon. You know about the flirtatious texts that were sent between Karen Read and Brian. Higgins was clearly pining over Karen, but for her, the flirtation had ran its course. It was done. She was happy and committed to John. You could see that in her actions with John that night. You don't have to guess. Brian Higgins, however, you can see in his actions, he wasn't quite so satisfied and he wasn't done. His text message, well, meaning, what the hell, Karen? What about me? Seemed aggressive, seemed annoyed. He didn't like being ignored. That was pretty clear. So he's 5 or 6 whiskeys deep into the night by this time, and she continued to ignore him. Then oddly, Higgins, who doesn't know John all that well, seems to want to coax John to 34 Fairview. I draw your attention to the waterfall tape if you want to take another look at it. It's at the 11:57 mark, between 11:57 and 11:58. Take a look at that tape. He's just about to leave. Higgins is just about to leave. He points over at John and he motions for him. Come on, come with me. And then at 12:20, he texts him, you coming here? This is a person he doesn't really know and didn't really talk to that entire night. Ask yourself, why was Higgins so insistent that John go to 34 Fairview that night? And then there's that sparring and fighting that he and Brian Albert were engaged in. Of all the things they could be doing, this is what they were doing just minutes before John O'Keefe walked into that house at 34 Fairview. We know that once John actually did walk in the door, it's about 2 steps, 4 feet or so, 2 steps for an adult male to reach that basement door. Remember, everybody was gathered in the kitchen. That's what Nicole Albert said. And every single witness agreed that at some point, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert left the group and went to another room. Where did they go? Where did they go together? Another important point. Chloe was not upstairs. Brian Albert slipped in one of his testimony that he provided. Quote, I was watching Chloe downstairs, monitoring her because of the other people in the house. She's not good with strangers. Remember that testimony. So what happened next? We absolutely know that John was in the house. The data, Ryan, Heather, they all established that. We know that John ascended or descended stairs. We know that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert excused themselves. How long does it take to have a crossword? How long does it take to have a fight? How long would it take for Brian Higgins to say to John, you know, your girl's been texting me. A push, a punch, a fall, pull Chloe off his arm, and now it's done. What is that? 5 seconds, 10. Doesn't take long at all. And then the sets in. Wasn't intended to go that far, but what's done is done. And then some very, very odd things start happening at the Albert household. Very odd indeed. What do we know? We know through the testimony and key swipes that Brian Higgins very oddly goes directly to Canton Police Department. Why would he do that? After a night of drinking and partying, why go to CPD when you're drunk? What was so important there? He couldn't even get his own story straight. First, he said it was administrative work. Then he said he was moving cars. Then he said it was a factor of both. Is it both? Was it neither? Or was he there to gather intel? Ask yourself, why go? But the odd things keep piling up, and here's another. Chloe was the Albert family pet. Not only did she appear to be gone from the house that morning on January 29th, nobody saw her there. Even Jen McCabe admitted, I didn't see her there. But they actually got rid of the dog altogether. Within months of this incident, the dog was gone, out of the house, rehomed, never to be seen again. This was a dog they had had for 7 years. Also a dog who had a bite history. Why was it so important to get rid of that dog? Was there something about the dog they did not want law enforcement to find out? Recall what Dr. Russell said. She's seen up to 1,000 animal attacks. In her expert opinion, John's right arm, those injuries are from an animal, quote, most likely a large dog. And Dr. Russell's testimony, I'll remind you, was undisputed by any witness for the Commonwealth. But there are more odd and unexplained things.
I know, it's such a great story. I don't know if it happened or not, but the story of an altercation between the decedent, John O'Keefe, Brian Albert, maybe Colin Albert, in that house at 34 Fairview, it's a great story. The sad thing is, we may never know what happened, and John O'Keefe seems to be kind of lost in the shuffle here. Catherine Lizardo is here, Lateef Gray. So let me start with you, Lateef. There's this part of this story that involves GPS, and I have a healthy skepticism of the whole GPS evidence. I don't give it the weight of DNA, but it suggests that not only did John O'Keefe go in the house, but he went downstairs into the basement where nobody ever looked. There was never a search anywhere in that house. What do you think that is telling this jury? Could that be one of the things they're wrestling with?
Could be. Maybe it could be that the jury has bought what the defense attorney has been telling them and is believing that this was one big grand cover-up. Whether or not they truly buy it, we'll find out soon when the verdict is rendered. But it appears that there's no consensus right now, meaning on guilt or not guilty. So somebody must be having some reservations back there in the jury room.
Yeah, Catherine, one of the things I'm sure they're looking at is that video, that crazy sallyport video. It's inverted. They went to the extreme of putting the date stamp on so it wouldn't be backwards. That's a pretty intense, if you believe the defense, that's evil stuff. What do you think about the impact of that evidence?
I think it's very impactful when we were talking about that, when that evidence was brought up, that it was inverted. We felt, and I felt, that the Commonwealth should have gone in front of that and mentioned it during their direct examination of the expert that was presenting that and laying the foundation for that video, and just say it was inverted. But it came out during the cross-examination. So that perception was definitely not good for the Commonwealth, to put it mildly. So they needed to address that in their closing arguments, and I unless I missed it, I did not hear it.
And Catherine, to me, it was even more nefarious because the date stamp was replanted on the inverted video. That's crazy. Hey, I'm going to thank and excuse you guys. Such a fascinating afternoon as the Karen Read case continues. Thank you, Catherine Lizardo. Thank you, Lateef Gray. Appreciate it. Hope to see you back here on the network. That's going to do it for me, Michael Bryant. Hey, try to do the right thing. Imran Ansari is up next. He may just have a verdict for you this afternoon. Have a great weekend.